For those of you who click into this video expecting like a clear winner in all categories, I would actually surprise you here. There is something else that I think is more important to consider. But first things first, looking at this lineup, some of you will be like, EOD, are you crazy? Is there even a need to compare them? I would like to just gently remind you of this thing that everyone made fun of way back then 1 year ago when Honkai Star Rail was still growing in its first year, Jingliu versus Topaz and Nambi. 1 year ago, it was clear the comparison between both of them, everyone was favoring one. 1 year later, it's a little bit different nowadays, and I would like to invite you to have a broader mind as we talk about the different categories of investment value for these two characters in Honkai Star Rail. And we, as always, will be super unbiased. Only right at the end, I'll give you my own biased thoughts if you guys care enough to stay for it as well. Let's talk about current value first. Current value is very important because if you are spending resources to pull this character right now, it's very important to know what they do for your account exactly right now, whether you're a new player, experienced player. Let's look. I always like to talk about current value in the landscape of team compositions. Right now in the game, we have about 8 teams. There are some people that say summon meta and whatever not, but it has yet to come. For now, 8 main styles in Honkai Star Rail, and if you have more or less all of these styles built, you are pretty much cruising through the entirety of the game, the ups and downs of the Memory of Chaos. So I highlighted here the characters that play into certain roles. As you can see, Rappa is mainly playing into break teams, whereas Acheron is a specialist, extremely good specialist at a debuff-oriented team. Both of them are technically can be played as hyper carry, but the one that outperforms significantly in hyper carry is definitely Acheron. If you are looking for big damage and extreme numbers, E2S1 Acheron is just ridiculous numbers. Out of all of the main DPSs in the game, if you have money, Acheron is probably the ones to go for. E0S0, however, much of it is still a question mark. So let's get into it. Rappa here, other than break and debuff and hyper carry aside, she is decently okay at skill point teams, skill point hungry teams, even as a sub DPS. For other hungry characters for skill points, for example, your Imbibitor Lune, why is that? It's because the only thing that Rappa does in her skill is AoE damage. And she does the same thing with enhanced basic attack. So you might as well just give her enhanced basic attacks if you have some way to like funnel the energy into her so she outs and basics. So skill point hungry characters, don't mind her as a second DPS. This is one of the things that makes characters like Blade very great and very useful as well. Acheron on the other hand wants to use skill points as much as she can so she can build her stacks faster, so it doesn't play as well. Fast and often, Rappa also does do relatively well in fast and often teams because she has action advance. She benefits a lot from all the movement mobility as well with the amount of color damage that she breaks, but Acheron is also okay, just that she doesn't have self-action advance. Now that aside, it's very clear that if you're trying to build one team, the debuff team, Acheron is one. If you are looking to expand your brick teams, maybe for some reason you didn't like Firefly's design, you just missed out on Firefly, and you don't plan to pull her for a rerun, which could be coming soon, as we talked about in our prediction video just before this one. If you're looking to go that way, Rappa is an interesting angle, even if you're consider running a double duo DPS team for a break, or you're eventually getting the new Tingyun 5-star as well, Fucc. That will be very interesting to consider and an angle, but we'll talk about it in a bit. This is for the current value section. In terms of the current value for both of them, the one that significantly outperforms is probably Acheron, especially with more investment. I have her at E2S1 and it's a ridiculous monster, but I also have another account with E0S0, and if you do not have certain characters like maybe Jiao, you do not have like a Pella well built, you don't have a roster that is dedicated for her, maybe with a Ventrine as well, so that you can provide some debuffs. E0S0 Acheron isn't as impressive as team compositions with E0S0 Firefly, E0S0 Fei Xiao. These are of course the other two competing styles. Rappa on the other hand, and as we are speaking, we are testing her on the experienced server already. I can't give you footage yet, but don't worry, it'll be out shortly as well. She works really fine at E0S0. I like it a lot. Her main function is really to break the enemies, and she works quite decently at very low investments. Who are the team members that really you are looking for? If you pulled for Jiao, if you have characters like Pella who's also on the banner, when you pull for Acheron, these characters work really much better with Acheron. If you have characters like Gallagher, you have Aventrine, Lingsha to some extent, all these characters are also decent for Acheron. On the other hand, if you have Rappa characters, for example, maybe you're playing with characters like Harmy MC, Gallagher, you have characters like, for example, Lingsha, you want to build like brick teams with Firefly, Xue Yi and stuff like that. On the different angle, this is the characters that you will likely turn towards more if you're looking for a DPS in that role and you just can't wait for Firefly. Not everyone likes Firefly. Maybe some of you are looking for another break DPS, especially like boot heal lovers. If you play boot heal, she's an interesting angle of pairing both of them together as well. So something that you can consider, because if you have boot heal, Rappa, Lingsha, or Gallagher in one team, you kind of like have 3 great elements covered already with a lot of colorless breaking in them too. Colorless breaking meaning you can hit across different types of element. So in terms of current value, I think it's very dependent on what you are looking for. Depends on the roster that you have. But if you have a little bit of resources, you got lucky with the gear that you can get, you're free to play, light cones and whatever not, I think Acheron is the clear number 1 right now. It's uncontested. There is no question about it. Rappa needs to prove herself. Acheron has already proved herself. She's been out for 6-7 months as a DPS in the game already. She has withstood relatively well in the test of time. More needs to be said because usually the second rerun is usually a question mark whether they will continue sustaining. But I'm just talking about current value here. So without a doubt, Acheron way better, but don't sleep on Rappa. She's also very interesting for break teams, especially if you're looking at other characters in the future value section, which we are touching on next, that are going into break. So while Acheron, without a doubt, one of the best DPSs in the game right now, triumphs massively in the current value section, what is more promising is future value of these characters. We have already 2 characters being drip marketed. We have Sunday and Fucc as well, 2 characters that are interesting, and 2 big things that are talked about. One is break effect meta that could be coming about. We talked about the break effect in our recent video as well. You can check that out on the channel if you're interested in more lore of why break is the one that is going to outperform out the 3 teams currently meta in the game. Other than break, you have the summoner meta, which is units that can summon. We have Lingsha, who is a new summoner type unit, summons bunny rabbit, and at the same time, you also have the new relic set that is in the game. These are indicators of where it's going to go in 2.7 and beyond, a changing meta shift that we also talked about recently. In this case, Rappa plays into the interesting break effect side of things. Acheron plays into neither of these themes. So that is one huge thing to consider. If you are a firm believer that DPSs will get power crept sooner or later, then Acheron has already been around for, as of time recording, like 2.6, let's say, already 6 patches by the end of 2.6. 6 patches is almost the entirety of 1.x. It is a very long time. If you are of a person that believes DPSs get power crept real soon, if 6 patches isn't enough, I don't know what exactly is, but I think that is something worth considering. Rappa, on the other hand, new characters that are released into the game, whenever they are up against unusual matchups like this, Hoyoverse never has a situation where the big guy always wins and the small guy always loses up against each other. This is very sus to me. The story of David and Goliath winning with a slingshot does give me a bit of inspiration here where Hoyoverse can turn the angles to. And I'm already seeing signs of new characters possibly going for drip, for break and drip and stuff like that. So anything can happen at this point. We are still looking maybe for a double DPS in the break meta. So that could be one angle of things. But of course, at the same time, we could have a double angle of Acheron as well as another Nihility DPS that's on the same level of Acheron. So anything can happen. I just think that they might be more incentivized to bring Rappa back for those people who miss her out right now. Maybe they'll keep buffing her in future. Similar to the likes of whenever you have someone that's an underdog for too long, they tend to give them a little bit of favoritism, and this is with the Topaz and Jingliu case, as well as even a character like Jingyuan and Zila back then. The underdog somehow always seems a little bit preferred over a long period of time. Maybe it's because the ownership of those characters are much less than Hoyoverse would have liked, so they might as well just try to sell their IP a bit more, so they help buff the characters. But anyways, that is too much long-term perspective. I think the future value of these characters is really, really interesting to consider. In that case, Rappa is definitely much more near-term focus, and definitely DPSs, if you believe there are going to be power crept sooner or later, Acheron is clearly at biggest risk for that reason alone. And track record has proven in many games that you've played, DPSs are never reigning supreme. Look at Imbibitor Lune and look at Jingliu nowadays. I think Rappa does stand a little bit of higher chance in the future value. But then again, these are not equal weighted sections. Doesn't mean it's a 1-1 right now. If you're looking for a current DPS that stomps everything, Acheron is great quality of life. She also like kills units in one shot on the overworld and stuff. At this point, talking about current and future value of like characters that are coming into the game, characters that have already been in the game, what's the game state, one important other thing is to consider alternatives in the game. Between the two of them, Acheron is like the modern day or 2.x version of hyper carry DPSs. If you think about Acheron's best teams, who are her best teammates? You have Jiao Nihility. Let's say you have E2S1. Not everyone has that, but let's say you have E2S1. And then you have Sparkle here, buffing up Acheron. And the last slot, you have Aventurine here. So triple characters supporting one DPS is the modern day hyper carry of the past. Hyper carry has all the while not performed well as games reach maturity as it goes on, because DPSs that come from many angles often do a lot more damage. So hyper carry DPSs are plenty because it's very easy to power creep hyper carry sections. If you talk about alternatives in the game, really is beyond just lightning DPS, because she obviously outperforms every single other lightning DPS in hyper carry. More important is, instead of character alternatives, is stylistic alternatives. What do I mean by that? Your main competition for Acheron is a team of Fei Xiao as well as a team of Firefly. Now granted, not everyone likes Acheron's playstyle, not everyone likes the nihility focus hyper carry kind of style. Some people like your damage coming from everywhere, like Fei Xiao's teams, where everyone contributes a little bit of damage, so people invested more in the angle. Some people really like Robin's design. Maybe some people like the Firefly angle of doing things. You like Firefly's design a bit more, you like the break kind of things. In that case, you have 3 choices. Usually people pick 2 out of 3 out of all of them, depending on your fancy. That is what I'm sharing with you as well. Without a doubt, she's top 3 in the game. You can argue any way around with who's the best, who's the worst out of the 3 of them. These, in my opinion, are the main alternatives for Acheron. Other than that, Rappa. Who are Rappa's alternatives? I think Rappa competes a lot more in a sense, because there are a lot more characters that, one, do imaginary breaking in an AoE. Even like some characters like Aventurine, which a lot of people have, Harmony MC, which is free already. These characters do a lot of imaginary AoE breaking from a supportive role. Luota to a much greater, some extent also, does AoE imaginary breaking. Some of us have free doctor ratio, so imaginary is actually a very crowded space and is not something that we super need. But out of all of the imaginary characters that we have in the game, I would like give you an analogy where Rappa is very similar to I must call it Aventurine, Argentine of Imaginary. She likely was going to be amazing in imaginary content with pure fiction game mode or any AoE content. She likely is going to like outperform. She is relatively niche in that sense, but I think she's going to do really well. But these tons of alternative, if you're just looking for imaginary alone, I think that is something that's important to consider. On the other hand, if you take away the imaginary side of things, so stretching my doctor ratio a little bit here, but if you are looking for a little bit different things outside of just imaginary comms, then it will be the break comms, the super break. And out of all of them, there are 3 characters that fulfill like the main DPS-y sort of role of super break, and that will be Firefly, Boot Hill, as well as a character like Rappa in this case. You can actually run 2 out of 3 of them in the same team as a dual DPS with Rappa because of her low skill point consumption. She doesn't need too much skill points at all, and she's relatively independent with some colorless breaking if you can get her outs up as well. She has self-action advance, relatively independent, hits nice AoE fashion to counter, for example, like Boot Hill's single target focus nature. Could be an interesting angle of doing things, and has super break inbuilt in the kit. So if you believe that we are sooner or later going to phase out of Harmony MC, maybe with the new Fucc character, Tingyun 5-star and stuff like that, having a character with inbuilt super break could be an interesting angle. Maybe you can even slap Sunday with her as well. Who knows? At this point, everything is a speculation. We'll cover more content as we get more official information. But in terms of these 2, I think at this point of time in the current game state, alternative definitely looks at current game state. So don't think of it as like a future alternatives kind of thing. In the current landscape, I think that Acheron has a little bit of a rarer kit compared to Rappa. So I'll give it 2 for Acheron, 1 for Rappa now in the 3 categories that we have rated so far. But of course, a lot of things to consider as well. The next up, now that we have talked about current game state, future value, we talked about alternatives in the game for you guys to consider who is the better pickup for us. The 4th category is very important because this is talking about Hoyoverse marketing tendencies, and you need to understand, if we are playing a gacha game which is a resource allocation game, it is very sus why Acheron is coming back in a time that we have back-to-back. Acheron's in the second half. She's not even together in the same half on Rappa's patch. You have back-to-back Acheron, you have Sunday, and you have Fucc all back to back. A draining patch for resources, and then who knows, 2.7 might be the last, and then 2.8 could be 3.0 already, draining all our wallets entirely. So if any of you ever are thinking of pulling for Acherons, you can wait for the live stream of 2.7 for more information. You get more detail. That's the benefit. A side note, of course, some of you who are waiting to pull this character, you don't have to do it on day one. I just want to give you a side PSA. But anyways, between both of them, I think it's much more, Hoyoverse has much better incentive to sell you new styles into the game so that you start to branch away from old meta. At this point, Acheron has been around for like 2.x, 2.1 all the way. It's like considered relatively older meta. Don't forget when Qingliu came out for her second rerun, that was the last time she was relevant, and then she disappeared for the entirety of 1.2.x. My biggest worry is the same goes for Acheron. A lot of people ask, how do you power creep a character like Acheron who is so universal? And this is talking about potential section, is because it's what Hoyoverse could do to change the game state. A lot of people think she's unfallable. No way to nerf her, no way to power creep her. Two things that you can easily do to make her irrelevant in the game. One, enemies have very, very high effect res to not get debuffed at all. If enemies cannot get debuffed at all, she doesn't build stack, she doesn't out at all. Why do I think that is a possibility? If you look at the Luota's 4-star light cone in Honkai Star Rail, the one that gives you effect res, there's a lot of things that give you percentage effect res and something that seems like it scales with effect res, but no character in the game scales with effect res at all yet. And that is something that they definitely will explore a little bit. They don't release stats for nothing, and I'm sure one day we'll have a character that scales with effect res, and when that day comes, what if your enemy all had the effect res bonus that Aventurine provides? That would be quite crazy, right? Acheron would not be able to land any debuff, her team would not be able to land any debuffs much. Or even let's say they have like some kind of cleansing mode. It only maybe Jiaochu's very high effect res can effect hit rate can actually hit through that. The second way that Hoyoverse could consider power creeping Acheron is definitely the prevention of break altogether. Granted, out of all three teams, Firefly suffers from it, Acheron suffers from it, even Rappa herself also suffers from it. If they wanted to do something so extreme to have more monsters that prevent themselves from being weakness broken, they have like weakness break blocking. That'll be like very, very crazy. That is two ways that they can power creep. On the other hand, if they wanted to buff break specific teams to outperform a bit more in terms of the meta game state out of the trinity so far, the break, follow up, and Acheron debuff teams that we have, all you needed to do is make a second break bar. Instead of being broken once, Hoyoverse could make characters be broken twice, increasing a lot of focus on break damage rather than just purely focus on crit damage, crit rate, crit damage, which Acheron is, which is relatively hyper carry-like in nature. Interesting angle to do things. In that case, if you have a character that hits in an AoE fashion with a double DPS, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to be able to prop these kind of things a lot more. In my opinion, potential of these two, I would say I would actually lean towards a character like Rappa, who plays into a lot of thematics, especially if we're going to get a new character, a very anticipated 5-star, Sunday, who's imaginary. So Sunday Imaginary already plays that, so there's Hopium there. There's also Fucc, the Tingyun 5-star, who, if provide some sort of break, which we predicted might be the case in our recent video because of the trends that we have spotted, these two new characters in 2.7, both pointing in the direction of Rappa, she likely is going to get better in the potential section. So just talking about these two things. In terms of lore-wise, Galaxy Rangers, you can have Acheron. Both of them are about fair in terms of the lore category. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But so it's like 2 for 2 now. Out of all of them, don't rank it in terms of like 2 for 2 means they're even. Right now in the game state, Acheron clearly outperforms. But the one key thing that I want you to consider is the free-to-play playability of these two characters. Acheron at E0S0 is not as great as E0S1. If you guys are pulling for E0S1, this is a whole different video. I'm not stopping you by any means. For those of you who are comparing E0S0 Acheron to E0S0 Rappa, and you have no other limited characters in the game, the cheaper alternative actually is Rappa, because Acheron, to get her working into like double nihility teams, you do need a lot of like Hela, you do need like Jiaochu to start seeing a bit more damage, and then finally you have a good like defensive support, like maybe Gallagher, you have for example Aventurine in the last slot to like start to see her actually popping off. Rappa, super cheap. You already have like free characters like Harmony MC. You can even play like Esther if you guys wanted to. Ranmei, of course, you can put in. We'll have like build teams videos on Rappa in a little bit where we put out on the channel. But free to play kit wise, I think Rappa is a lot cheaper. Acheron is clearly more expensive. Her best light cones are all gacha. Boundless Choreo, her signature, Patience is it patience all you need along the passing show or something like that. But all of them are all gacha. They're very expensive to pull, and it's very, very different from the base copies. Whereas Erudition, you still have like decent free-to-play alternatives. Between the both of them, I think I'll give the win to Rappa. Acheron is probably a lot lower on the two of them. But here's the thing. As always, with the end of this video, I always like to share with you my thoughts and my honest recommendation to any of you. Even though this seems very one-sided, my honest recommendation is, why are you even needing to pull any of these at all? If I were to be a free-to-play player, a small spender, I would save right now. 2.6 is tempting. It looks interesting because you have great characters like Acheron, you have great characters like Aventuring coming back, but it all seems a little bit sus for me. 2.7 looks very, very interesting and is a time of changing matter. Do you like to prepare for new things, or do you like things that have been tried and tested? Ultimately, it's your preference. Personally, I like to move with the meta. I like to evolve myself. It keeps things fun as well, new game state. But at the end of the day, the preference is yours. I hope you appreciate such things that we laid out in this video. Like and subscribe for more such future content. We do this every single patch. Check out these two videos, which I think you might be liking right now. See you in the next video.